Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
Hello, a very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, a new report says UMEME is cheating government in exaggerated loss compensation claims. How is the company responding to this report and other concerns being raised about its operations? Details from the ad hoc committee of parliament, which was tasked to investigate the energy sector, have started to emerge, with the latest indicating the power distribution company UMEME has been cheating government through exaggerated power losses in exchange for compensation. The report indicates that the power losses that have reached 38% now have led to high end-user tariffs, and we know that UMEME was contracted by government to partly reduce energy losses by improving the quality of the power lines, reducing illegal connections, and delivering better power gadgets such as meters. But according to the report, UMEME has failed to deliver as expected, and instead Ugandans are being forced to pay heavily for power that would have been even cheaper with the coming on board of the 250 megawatt Wijagali hydropower dam. The above had already been noted in the Salim Saleh Power Sector Probe report, which actually recommended that UMEME should be kicked out of the Ugandan power sector. MPs have recently questioned the just concluded UMEME initial public offer, where it sold shares to Ugandans and foreign investors. The MPs want the Ministry of Finance to explain if the Capital Markets Authority undertook due diligence before the company forwarded its shares to the public. UMEME offered shares to the public from October 15th to November the 7th, with the hope of paying 171.2 billion shillings from the more than 622 million shares, but some people who bought shares have just realized that the larger part of the generated money will be used to pay off an old debt. The UMEME contract comes to an end in 13 years' time, but under the agreement, it can be reviewed and renewed. This, however, requires UMEME to effectively deliver on its obligations to serve Ugandans better. So tonight we ask, as a consumer, how do you rate the service being rendered by UMEME? If UMEME is cheating Ugandans and the government, as indicated in the report of Parliament, does it deserve more time to distribute power? Also, how is UMEME responding to these issues? Our guests tonight, Mr. Sam Zimbe, General Manager in charge of Corporate and Regulatory Affairs at UMEME. You're most welcome, Mr. Zimbe.
Thank you.
Also joined by Mr. Morrison Rwakakamba, Chief Executive Officer at the Agency for Transformation.
Thank you, Edmond, and good evening, viewers and listeners.
Viewers, because we're also on the internet, you can see a Spectrum video of YouTube anytime you like to say it. Mr. Zimbe, you are a veteran in energy matters. You worked with UEB many years ago. Now you are with UMEME. Why does UMEME inflate its losses?
Thank you, Edmond. First of all, I would try to clarify my position and my responses and the context of UMEME's response. We are responding to some media reports, not to a report, because we don't know that the report, the parliamentary committee report, has not been delivered to us. So, by definition, we can't comment on contents which we are unaware of. But we can comment on reports that have appeared in one of the papers today. And first and foremost, the headline is just sensational. A company like UMEME, who has a mandate, it has shareholders, it reports to their reporting requirements to government. There's a regulator, and the regulator's duties. That is why a sector like the energy sector has to have a regulator, and their role is to scrutinize and all the activities, and we have an open book. You know, they can come in any time, verify investments, verify losses. So the assertion that a company like UMEME can inflate and rip off consumers or government, for that matter, are really unfortunate. I'll just take you through the process, especially with respect to recovery of losses or factoring in of losses in the tariff. And I emphasize tariff. The company agreed a concession agreement a set of agreements which have a lease and assignment agreement with UEDCL. This is the Uganda Electricity Distribution Company.
Do what?
A lease and assignment.
Lease and assignment, yes.
Agreement. That allows UEDCL, it allows UMEME to manage the assets that are owned by UEDCL on behalf of government. And there are provisions which dictate how we should manage those assets, and they are clear. Then we have a power sale agreement with UETCL. This is the entity from whom we buy power from. This is the Uganda Electricity Transmission Company. Again, there are provisions that govern the transaction of buying power from them. They buy power, of course, from the generators. Another set of agreement is with government. This is the government support agreement, which lays out the mechanisms and it supplements other agreements. It lays out what we should do. It lays out what government can do to assist the activities of UMEME. It does not, and I emphasize, it does not state that UMEME will get subsidies from government. Then another set of agreement. This is very, very important. They are the licenses. We have a license to supply and distribute electricity, and this license is with the Electricity Regulatory Authority, ERA. Now, the license doesn't stand alone. It also has other subsidiary pieces of legislation referred to as the Primary Grid Code. This is statute, and our license captures all the statutory, all the requirements under statute. So you can see there's a range of, the framework is huge, and it will be very difficult for any distributor to take advantage even with those sort of agreements I've talked about. Now, specifically for the losses, when UMEME came into operation in 2005, there was a trajectory, a loss reduction trajectory, which was embedded in the concession agreements, more particularly with the license, with the ERA. That gave the trend at which losses should be going down. Yes, it started from 33%, going down to 28% by the year 2011. So that is a trajectory that was agreed on, signed.
And you've made that's a part of the agreement.
By 2011, our losses were actually lower than 28%. They were 27.2%. Now, in between 2005 to 2011, a number of factors arose. And I must probably highlight one factor which is not understood. The concession agreements had an exit period of 18 months. That is a period where 18 months from the date of operation, 1st of March when we started, within 18 months there was an automatic review. And it was referred to as an exit period because following that review, if a number of things occurred, and those either from the investor or from government, if they thought that the concession was not running well, there was an option for each one of them to call it.
To pull out.
Yep.
Kind of probationary period.
That's right. And unfortunately, before the 18-month exit period ended, in 2006, there was another catastrophe. That is when we experienced a huge deficit in generation, resulting in extensive load shedding. And definitely we forget where we have come from, but what a challenge it was. The hydro plant in Jinja, with the capacity to generate almost 380 megawatts, could only generate less than 120. Hence, government coming in to introduce what was at the time considered to be temporary. That is the thermal.
What caused this? Give us a very brief. I mean, 380 to 200. What caused that? That's the second dam that they've dug.
Well, of course, I can't give you a technical response, but what we do know,
water levels went down.
Yeah, water levels levels went
After
down.
second channel was dug.
There was a drought, putting aside the second dam. There was a drought which affected Uganda, not only Uganda, but downstream. Most countries in the region were affected. So that meant that government had to bring in the most expensive form of generation, and that was emergency generation, to cater for businesses.
Okay.
Yeah, it was at the time better to bring in expensive form of generation
And keep the economy running.
And keep the economy running.
Right.
Now, it introduced two things. It meant that tariffs had to go up, and if you recall, tariffs went up by almost 70% in November 2006. And with high tariffs, losses were expected to go up. So it was a change. The game changed from 2005 when women started to a different set of circumstances. Hence, the amendments that were made in 2006. And these amendments, you don't amend a contract by not one side
unilaterally.
Yeah, you can't. So there were amendments agreed upon by government and the investor. Now, they took account of the current status of high thermal generation. High tariffs had gone up. The propensity to steal and the chance, and of course, we are very worried that the losses would go up. And of course, collections with high tariffs and people resorting to power thefts in many cases
become negatively innovative.
That's right, and we feared that collections will actually dampen. Yeah, so that was the context of the whole issue of losses and why changes were made to the contract.
All right. So you don't get any compensation from government.
No.
I'm looking at the contract with government, the government support agreement. What does it say?
What it does, the government support agreement does a number of things. Yeah, it provides support, for example, with respect to power losses and fighting power thefts. We can go to government under the provisions of the government support agreement to seek assistance from government, because this is not something we can do unilaterally. So that provides...
If you make a loss, they would have to pay you some money.
No. What it does is that they will provide logistics, for example. Security agencies can work with us to go into areas where we are experiencing huge power thefts.
No money exchanging hands or accounts.
It cannot happen because there's a regulator who would in any case regulate that.
Right.
Yeah, the flow of funds, the other flow is such that we have an end user tariff.
Right.
Yes, we are responsible for collecting that tariff, but the component of that tariff, interestingly, is only 17 to 18%. That is all that covers the distribution costs. The rest go upstream. So we have to collect to sustain the sector, both for the transmission company and upstream for the generators.
So you make only less than 20% of the money.
That's right. Yeah, and we pawn time. Every month we get a bill from UETCL in full. They don't even take account of the losses. If we suffer losses downstream, we take the hit.
You still pay for it.
We take the hit. If people don't pay and they resist paying, and we try hard,
you still pay for that.
Yeah, we still pay for that. That is why worldwide, every country, this is not only Uganda, within the tariff mechanism, within the tariff model, there is always an element of losses that is factored into the tariff. It's not a new phenomenon for Uganda. It is worldwide. Now, the next question is the quantum of losses.
Yes.
Yes, the distribution sector in Uganda has experienced high losses. When I talked about the 33%, that was in the trajectory. For tariff purposes, I must emphasize.
Yes.
On the ground...
Those are the technical losses.
Yes. No. Combined. And we...
Technical and actual theft?
And what we call commercial losses.
Right.
This is pure theft. The split at the time was estimated to be about 50%. So 15% technical losses. And that is high, but it reflects the nature of the distribution network itself. Hence, the need to invest in the system to ensure that not only we curb or reduce technical losses, where you need a lot of investment, but also commercial losses in the sense that you make it difficult for people to tamper with the network. So starting from 33, we realized the losses were much higher at 38. So when negotiations were undertaken in 2006, you're not starting from a low base, you're already starting from a higher base. Now, from 2005 to 2006, what we factored into the tariff were those loss factors that were in the agreement. So although losses were high, the difference between what was factored into the tariff and the actual losses in the field was covered by the business. So we took the hit. So it is a bit inaccurate to claim that while losses were higher than 33% in the field,
right,
the consumer or government ended up paying the difference.
Okay.
It is inaccurate.
That's
well,
you've given an elaborate explanation.
Yeah.
From what we can see from the assessment that we would have, you probably have a case.
Yeah.
Maybe there are listeners who know something that we don't know, but from what you just explained, you've been elaborate. It looks like you are being hit in the wrong place. Maybe Morrison Rwakakamba, you can talk to us about your own assessment of this.
My own assessment, Edmond and listeners, is that one, why is it that, for instance, agencies of government and people are supposed to represent consumers, because we don't have strong consumer movements in this country and the parliament, why did it accept, or why did it keep quiet, and UMEME had to go and list the initial public offer, and then they come later to say, yes, we had a report, and we know that UMEME has been exaggerating its losses, so therefore it was not supposed to list on the stock exchange. It is really something. When I saw the headline and read that the report was coming from Parliament, I really did not understand that, because there were other reports that Edmond you mentioned about, the General Salim Saleh report, which talked about a lot of inefficiencies, if you ask me, and even gave sweeping recommendation and said, look,
should we cancel the contract?
Yeah, we should cancel the concession, the 20-year concession that was given out to UMEME. So why is it that Parliament and other actors, including the Uganda Capital Market Authority, go ahead to recommend that UMEME goes ahead to issue an IPO? So that is really something that I've been trying to go around.
Well, let's get to your explanation. You can't just lament.
No, it's really not just about lamenting, you see.
Maybe,
but maybe before you... No.
Before you come in,
so before you come in, yes, as consumers, for instance, we still see that there are a lot of issues, okay? And Mr. Sam Zimbe has just said, justified some of these losses due to poor generation of power. But you realize that every time power is stolen, every time some people tamper with power, the charge or the tariff, the incidence is shifted to another consumer.
Yes.
And that's why the price of electricity in this country is almost the highest.
In the region.
So even when they make profits, when they recoup profits, it's not that they have been efficient. It's just that they have transferred the incidence, you see. But they also go ahead, account for those losses, and seek compensation from government. And you see, when you see this headline from the New Vision saying government has to pay for those losses, it's actually taxpayers. So you are a consumer, you're paying a high price, okay? Because they are power losses. But still, those losses, they are recouped at two levels: at transferring the incidence to another customer who pays a higher price, and to the taxpayer, and that is government. So I would want a clarification. From some on that. But secondly, I've just been receiving some other
very briefly some
Facebook comments from some consumers. There is one called Robert Akanga who just says is that he was given an estimated bill.
All right.
And no, he went ahead and complained and said, why are you giving me an estimated bill?
What did they say?
So they said they have a right to give an estimated bill.
Well, this is Spectrum Radio. I'll go for a break. Tonight, a new report says UMEME is cheating government in exaggerated loss compensation claims. We're asking how is the company responding to this report and other concerns being raised about its operations. One of our guests is Mr. Zimbe, General Manager in charge of corporate and regulatory affairs at UMEME. Maybe you know something that we don't. You'll call in and talk to us this very evening. We'll be back.
Excuse me, guys. Let me through, please.
Check this guy. Goodness, dude, what are you doing? Get real.
Just move
Just
a little,
what?
a little bit. Man, what are you doing bringing a cow into the sitting room? It's just for when I want milk.
Just what?
Just please move. Let it come and sit here.
What's wrong with this guy?
You cannot keep a cow in your home, but you can get the freshness of its milk straight from the farm into your home. Get fresh dairy milk for freshness straight from the farm every day. Fresh Diary, so fresh.
Discover the new invigorating taste of Red Vodka Lemon. Red Vodka Lemon. Reinvent the night. Not for sale to persons under 18.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight. A new report says UMEME is cheating government and in exaggerated loss compensation claims. How is the company responding to this report and other concerns being raised about its operations? Our guests tonight, Mr. Zimbe, General Manager in charge of corporate and regulatory affairs at UMEME, and Mr. Morrison Rwakakamba, Chief Executive Officer at the Agency for Transformation.
I was still finishing.
Yes, Morrison.
You see, so when this Akanga Robert said, you people, I don't want an estimated bill. I want you to come, first check the meter, and bill me the real cost. So when they did that, when they went back to that old system, Akanga Robert's bill reduced by 45%.
That's substantial.
So yes, what was then the role of that estimated bill, and why did the UMEME leadership and the UMEME management agree to that?
No.
Secondly, there are some consumers who have been interacting with, who have tried to use mobile money services in order to pay their bills. But the reconciliation,
it takes a long time.
Takes a very, very long time.
How much time? 45 days?
You know, almost that, and they stay in darkness. So from a consumer perspective, if you're a profit-making company and you are inviting people to buy shares and invest, and you are not keen on serving these consumers where you recoup your profit, how are you going to make sure that those who have invested, you see, in your stocks are actually going to make a dividend?
Mr. Zimbe, can respond to those concerns. There are also concerns that you rushed into the IPO knowing about the parliamentary report that was coming through.
Yeah, thank you. Morrison has raised a number of issues, very important issues. I will start with the IPO because that is key. You see, every company that actually goes out to list their shares, they have to go through.
It's a process.
Yeah, it's a process, and these are stringent processes they have to go through. It's not just waking up overnight and you say you're going to list shares. There are agencies which are set up under statute to supervise, to ensure that the process is adhered to. I can only talk about what we have to do. When we set up to list the shares, it wasn't a new phenomenon, by the way. It was always envisaged in our concession agreements that at some point in our operations, we will go out and float shares from the outset. And it is well stated in the government support agreement. Because listing has a number of benefits. It provides a platform for any company to be able to raise financing, not to rely on a single investor bringing in that investment. At some point, if a company is to grow, it has to take that route to float onto the money markets or capital markets. So it was always our intention. Now, with respect to process, it is stringent. We had to get advisors And these are reputable advisors, I must add.
Bank and
Yeah. So it is not really going down to get someone from the street. And they scrutinize. They look at your financials. You have to have a reporting accountant, notwithstanding the fact that we have external auditors, Ernst and Young. Yeah.
One of the big four in the world.
One of the big four. But we still have to get a reporting accountant. It's a requirement within the rules. And they look at the records, they look at the financials, and they certify that your financials are either as you have stated. If there is anything, they have to alert, they have to put
Sam, can you clarify this? In your annual report of 2010, you actually made a loss of 2 billion. In 2011, you made a profit of 23 billion. And the law says that to list on the stock exchange, you need 3 years of clean financial.
Very much so.
Okay, so why is it that law? Why is it that law was floated?
No.
Why did the Capital Market Authority go ahead?
Morrison, you as an individual, you can't make that statement because the Capital Market Authority, CMA, as I said, is a body set up under statute. I would not imagine that a body like CMA would overlook something as basic as that. What it is that you present your financial statements for the period stipulated. The Capital Market Authority will go through and scrutinize. They will come back with questions. Incidentally, for the year where there was a loss reported, that was the result of foreign exchange movement as opposed to operations.
So it wasn't an operational loss.
No, it was. By the way.
Okay.
They were operational losses, and that's really very clear.
The prospectus is there. That was the reason why you have to have a prospectus. For any intending investor, that investor would seek clarification. And will get a response. There's no question about that, either from the CMA or from us in UMEME. So, Morrison, if you wanted clarification on the prospectus...
Sam, your stock has done really very well, and I think it is oversubscribed, which is very interesting that maybe investors saw that they would make money through it. Yeah, but what is worrying is that all these investors or subscribers, did they do it, with full information? Or they rushed it like Safaricom, they rushed it like when DFC listed, and most of them made deep losses. Do all these investors, investors should be concerned whether they had...
Thank you, Morrison.
Whether they had all the full information.
That is the very
because, you see, you are a monopoly, you see, and maybe people would hedge on that and say, since you're a monopoly,
your market is guaranteed.
Your market is guaranteed, you are even getting these compensations from government, there is profitability. But as a company, are you efficient? If government or if parliament opened this market of distributing energy, of distributing power, can UMEME be competitive? If they opened it up, would consumers benefit?
This is the good thing with the energy sector. I can say that the energy sector in Uganda is vibrant. The opportunities are immense. We are just tapping. Where you have an access rate of just under 14% of supply.
Or 12% people use electricity.
Exactly. Where you have that sort of level of access, you can imagine the potential for the sector.
You actually get 50,000 people every year.
So
new consumers.
We are getting applications from large businesses, businesses that have been set up for many years, but they want to expand. They are already yearning for more power. We are getting
roofing could take 20 megawatts. It's a small town.
Easy. So those are the issues that are put into the prospectus. Our assessment of where the sector is moving. Of course, we have highlighted the challenges and that we have to do, and the CMA has looked at those. We have highlighted.
So everything is above board. You don't hide anything.
You can't hide anything.
Ernst & Young is a global group. You can't corrupt them locally.
Definitely.
It's international. One of the
and
top
this issue of cheating government, inflating losses, those are the issues they will look at. First of all, they will look at the mechanism for verifying, for example, losses. I would confirm to our listeners that the regulatory authority doesn't also just look at figures and take it for
granted.
granted.
Have to scrutinize them.
Yes.
Let's get some context here. Ernst & Young, I think, was one of the people, but was one of the companies that said that the compensation to Basajja Balaba was astronomical. They can't say such things, so they would really not favor you. They would say it straight.
They would say it straight to us because they're independent external auditors. It's a cardinal rule. Yeah, if they said otherwise, they are also bound by professional ethics.
And the rating of the world stock would go down.
Very much so. Yeah. So when you have different sets of auditors,
well, I think you believe
external auditors. Lastly, I'm not talking on behalf of the Electricity Regulatory Authority, but I know because we work with them. They engaged external consultants.
Right.
Since 2005, they have engaged two international firms. One which was engaged in 2006, a firm called No Consult in Norway.
Consult from Norway, yes.
Yeah. They came in to study losses in the Uganda electricity distribution network. I don't think that that was a wasted exercise. Of course, it informed the regulator as to the challenges in the sector. They looked at the various causes of power thefts, technical. They looked at the incidences of power thefts downstream at households, and they looked at our strategies for curbing those losses, and they made recommendations to ERA. They recognized that losses were high. So with respect to confirming the levels, that is one arm. Now we went into 2010. The regulator wisely, and we believe they did the right thing, engaged another external firm called PB Power based in South Africa. They carried out an extensive study of again losses in view of the additional power generation that had come on stream, and they also made detailed recommendations. ERA didn't stop there. As part of our negotiations for our targets for the next 7 years, they engaged in a third consultant, let it be from PB Power.
Yes.
And the recommendations of that external consultants were the basis of the ERA agreeing targets with us. And because it was a transparent process,
yes,
we agreed with the ERA on a loss reduction trajectory for 2012, moving from the 27% we talked about, and we must not forget that the target was 28%.
Yes.
So an assertion that we have not...
You met the target.
Yeah. As set in the concession agreements.
Right.
As to what should be the real level of losses in
the global standard, the regional standard.
It is debatable. Kenya is at around 15-16%. Our target, again, the trajectory, and we call it the optimal trajectory, which was recommended, and we agreed to it by the regulator, is getting to 14.7% by the year 2018.
2018.
Yeah.
Morrison.
And
what do you see for the consumers?
Let's hear from you, Mr. Zimbe. Lastly, then we hear from
Lastly, the investment required to hit that target is huge.
How much do you need?
The external consultant estimated an investment requirement purely for losses of around $400 million.
Morrison.
Yeah, I will. I mean, you see, Mr. Zimbe, me, I go back to the consumer who is getting this service of energy. Now you outsourced a company that is supposed to disconnect people and reconnect them. That is not purely attached to UMEME. Some people are disconnected unfairly, others are fairly disconnected, but when they pay back, when they go to UMEME and pay, reconnection can take 1 week, 4 days, 2 weeks. And you find people in blackout, and these are small businesses, and these are households that they need to operate. Why is that so? And the other issue, before Mr. Zimbe also comes in, the second issue, is that your concession ends in 2025. I think we've got 13 years left. And there is a possibility, especially if you don't perform well, if these reports from Parliament are coming up, that it may not be renewed. So what happens to investors? And I want to give you an example. In the United States and these other stock markets where you have groups, portfolio pools like NASDAQ, Standard & Poor, Dow Jones, it's a pool of so many companies that have invested, that if you invested in one company and it made losses, then through the pool, you'd actually get your money. So if you closed tomorrow, if you made a lot of losses, what happens to the investors?
Okay. Mr. Zimbe, very briefly.
Where are we going to hedge their risk?
Thank you for that. Let me just respond to the operational issues first. Yes, listing or not listing, you're always going to have challenges, operational challenges. And really, what I can say to listeners is that we are focusing on strategies to address issues you've highlighted. Disconnections. Why do we have to disconnect? Because someone has not paid. Let's not forget about it.
Yes, not because you don't like their fees.
Yeah, and it is a last resort measure. We would not want to disconnect anyone, but unfortunately, in some cases, we have to resort to that.
Yes.
That is why we want to use technology to address the issues of disconnection. Contractors, contracting, by the way, is not a bad strategy in a way, because you tend to take away non-core activities.
It becomes a bad strategy if you disconnect somebody, that person pays, and then it takes 2 weeks before there is no reconnection.
Yeah.
I am not bothered about disconnecting if somebody has not paid.
You've not invested in that?
No, in fact, with the disconnection, we work...
The reconnection.
The reconnection, we have a license. That license allows us, tells us exactly...
you can outsource.
Yeah, within which days, first of all...
How many days does the agreement allow you? 2 weeks?
No, it doesn't allow 2 weeks. Any person who makes a payment after having been disconnected, which it is our priority to make sure that they are reconnected.
You outsource to be efficient, but...
Yeah, but let me just...
Very briefly,
one point. Let's move out. We want to get away from disconnection.
So you pay, people pay in advance.
That is why we want to ensure that most of the domestic consumers have prepayment metering.
Let's hear from your listeners. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. You can call in now. 0414 our numbers. 0414 348 111, 0312 260 390, 0312 261 390. Spectrum, hello? Yes, sir, your name? Yes. Yes, sir, go on.
Yes, I wanted to ask you what is the use of meters on houses? Are they for beautifying houses or are they for reading the current? Because in fact, there's many people when it comes to read the meter, they look to different readings, and then the money which they pay is different. The meter that you reading that you are going to pay like 150,000, and then the bill, when it is jumping in like 150,000, and then when you go like complain, they say that our computers have already registered that, so there is nowhere where we're going to do that. So we are the ones making losses instead of them, and it is a company which is not making losses.
Spectrum, hello? Hello? Please talk to us, don't be bashful. Hello? Yes, sir, your name?
Hello?
Yes, you're live on Spectrum. Your name?
Yes, my name is Joseph.
Joseph, yes?
There's a factory of women that have come of late, where they come into an area and collect meters of customers, about 10 of them in a local area. Then they build a factory where they close those meters. Now, the consumers cannot monitor the readings there because they only wait for bills that come at the end of the month. How does it explain that? How can I defend a bill when I cannot even read my meter?
You understand that? Okay, let's get them all together.
We'll try to,
Yes, your name?
Good evening, Brother Edmond.
Good evening, my friend. Your name?
This is Morrison, sir.
Yes, Monsieur.
First of all, it was actually a great mistake by the government of Uganda to privatize such a sensitive station. You did this like electricity and water are free of charge in some countries, and then if there is any charge, then it is a minimum one. Then, secondly, I'm making such losses means mismanagement and then eventually incompetence. When you make bid for others, their contracts, they are should be terminated because that's corruption. Because at the end of the day, they collect a lot of money, or they is nothing or whatever. Then, my question is two. Why are the lanes for maybe too rude? Actually, don't they give them some bit of customer care? Because if you look at the language they use, and when they come to this question, that is too much. Actually, we are kind of maybe the other. If there was any competitor, well, let's do you do another thing for this. Otherwise, they are saying, thank you, dear Edmond.
Spectrum, hello?
Hello?
Yes, sir, your name?
My name is Zimbe. I'd like to also raise my complaint. You find you have been given a bill of about 2.7 million shillings. When actually it is their mistake. So you go to the offices, you complain, they say no. There is an anomaly to be corrected, pending adjustment. It goes for 3 years, and if they simply come on and off disconnecting you, they don't even end there. Some staff people are abusing your people at home. You raise them on the phone, they say, we can't get the phone. They abuse each other at home. They disconnect you. Then you go back to the offices, they reconnect you. Another week, they come for a disconnection. I don't know.
Spectrum, hello, our final caller. Yes, your name?
Good evening.
Good evening, sir, your name?
That's my name.
Yes.
This very simple question goes to the women people. That I had them telling us that we are getting back to those old days where we used to see those poles. Maybe you may be made up of concrete and whatever. Why don't we organize ourselves that we'll go underground cables as that?
Let's get back to the studio. Underground cables, as though we are a developed country. Mr. Zimbe.
Right. In fact, I will start with the last caller. Very important. Definitely, use of concrete poles is something which we are looking at.
So people don't steal.
Yeah, there are areas like swamps. It might be better to use concrete poles. The whole network is going to be
farmers of trees are going to suffer.
Definitely not, because there would definitely be a need to. But there are areas where you need underground cabling, for example in towns. That is something which is important, and I'm grateful for the caller, because those are the strategies we are looking at. The scope to use concrete poles where it is possible. The scope to really look at underground cabling, especially in towns. And you can see the mess in many towns where you have those wires hanging. It might be better to actually take the route of using underground cabling.
Like fiber optic under
that's right. And it is in our strategies. Our strategies actually are that we are looking at concrete poles. Mr. Businje and a number of other callers raised issues relating to billing and metering. Before I respond to those, I'll ask my friend here, Morrison. Any utility cannot work alone. You need to interface with associations. You are associated with a consumer association. You cannot deal with every query alone. In most cases, you need to visit a premise to find out what is at the location. When it comes to the issues of taking out metering, I think those are issues that can be taken through a consumer association. What I can say is that the ERA, the Electricity Regulatory Authority, has done something noble. They have set up electricity consumer committees.
Yes.
And these ECCs in the various towns are meant to really look at those issues before they become big issues. If someone comes through an association and they say, look, I have had my bill not being attended to for many months, there is a route.
I think somewhat you need to be honest about is that there are operational issues that are hurting customers, and that you need to reform your corporate governance, your customer care, and maybe look at companies like MTN, which have become a household name. They have issues, but I think they are more liked. You have water. I think water had those problems, but it improved for the last 5 years and doing a bit. Few people are complaining about water bills. So what's wrong with UMEME?
No, in fact, what you just touched on it.
Seriously,
that's why we're using technology.
So you really need to accept that there are problems, and that is how you will improve as a company. Yeah. And for the investors like Edmond who have bought shares, yeah, then they would benefit from the profits you recoup from us.
So. We use technology to install prepayment metering. We are using mobile money. Those are the things, initiatives that really will make a change to improve our.
You're using mobile money, but you're not reconciling.
I think those are
payments.
isolated instances. At a higher level, the reports I get is that the take-up is very good.
All right.
Now, just allow me to respond to only 2 areas. I think you raised the issue pertaining to the IPO.
Yes.
Someone who has bought shares in the company. What we cannot do is to predict what might happen over the next so many years. No one can attempt to do that. But what we do is to put figures, and we scenarios, and we say, look, we expect to get more power generation.
Projections.
Government is working hard to increase power generation. In the National Development Plan, it is clearly stated that the government is aspiring to ensure that we get at least to 3,000 megawatts of power generated within the next few years, and a number of projects are now on stream to achieve that. So that's what we put into the prospectus. And then efficiencies. Yes, a company like ours, yes, we have had challenges. I can't shy away from that. We have had challenges, and those challenges are being handled and addressed. The issues of billing and metering will definitely go away when everybody has a prepaid meter. Of course, we now have other issues with the prepaid metering because they are not all tamper-proof. We've had cases where those meters have been tampered with. So we have to catch up with technology. And lastly, the sector is vibrant. UMEME is doing its best to ensure that it plays its part to ensure that the entire sector is sustained. Now, any distributor, it may be another company, must address the issues we've been talking about.
Maybe that's the point I wanted to make.
And really, it is how a distributor tackles those issues, and they all require investment.
Mr. Rwakakamba.
Yeah, I think over and above UMEME, the Capital Market Authority and the Uganda Securities Exchange, I could see there is some cross-listing going on, especially within the rubric of East African community. I think we need to start a situation where we have pool portfolios in order to hedge losses from investors who are buying shares from these IPOs.
That's something for the USC.
With the market
for USC and CMA.
That's a very valid point. It helps in other countries, like I mentioned, to hedge some of these losses, lower the risk. How did this IPO go? Very briefly, Mr. Zimbe. The results are supposed to come out tomorrow. Give us
a brief update. And you know, the IPO actually closed on the 7th.
Tomorrow we expect some results.
And there were a number of share pools. I will start with the international share pool,
which went very well, oversubscribed.
It was oversubscribed, which means that investors out there, outside Uganda,
they know what's going on.
They know what is going on.
How did the Ugandans do?
The Ugandans,
the Mosokis.
The take-up. Well, maybe this is a reflection of the economy and the society.
They couldn't take it up.
There's always, they did take up, but at the last moment. There was a rush in the last 3 days.
Right.
And of course, the stockbrokers, we used a number of outlets. We used all the banks, African Alliance as the lead stockbroker. But there was a lot of activity
in the last
in all the outlets.
Did you sell them all out?
I'm not allowed to give results of the actual IPO, but what I can say is that the pool for institutional investors, very well subscribed. The pool for institutions in East Africa and Uganda, well subscribed, in fact oversubscribed.
All right.
The pool for the retail was well subscribed.
So now give us better services, efficient services.
And that is what I'll commit. That is what I'll commit as a member of management in UMEME to provide efficient and reliable service.
We have to go. Thank you very much.
As a consumer, that's what you pay for.
Mr. Sam Zimbe, consumers who pay our bills as well.
Yes,
like Morrison.
Very much so.
Thank you very much, dear guest. Mr. Sam Zimbe, General Manager in charge of Corporate and Regulatory Affairs at UMEME. He's a veteran in these matters. He was General Manager during UEB days. Some of you might not have heard it, the Uganda Electricity Board, which was split into 3 companies together with ERA to form what we have the new dispensation. Mr. Morrison Rwakakamba, Chief Executive Officer at the Agency for Transformation. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond. Spectrum. We'll be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in English.
It's the time again. Just sweat a little for better. It's that moment to